Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Laura Brady. I'm a technical consultant here at HP, and we appreciate you taking time out of your morning today to join our webinar on print security. I have the pleasure of introducing David Rose, who is our Americas and Worldwide Solutions Business Manager for HP. He's had 10 years in the document industry, imaging industry, and manages our security and solutions business here. Prior to his current role, he was a security advisor to HP's worldwide security practice. So he's got a lot of knowledge about what he's going to talk to you about today. He currently educates organizations on the risks and ramifications of not addressing and reducing attack surfaces in the print environment. He lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and does a really great job presenting. So I'm sure you guys will be entertained. As David said, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have any questions, please feel free to type any questions you have in there, and we'll be answering them as we go along and also at the end. Also at the end, we will be doing a giveaway, and we need you to stay tuned till the end so you can hear the details on the giveaway. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to David Rose. Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. Yes, I'm Dave Rose, and I am going to talk today around security. And what I really wanted to talk about is about 4 key areas. We're going to talk about some of the real risks that are out there. We're going to talk about managing those. We're going to talk a little bit about working from home and some of the next steps you should take. With this, I just want to keep in mind, oops, sorry, my mouse is getting ahead of me, is keep this open dialogue. There's a lot of information to share. It can go fast. It can be overwhelming. Print can be, a new conversation for a lot of people around security, or, we feel that we have a lot of establishment in that currently. And so it's like, okay, what's new? What's interesting? And I'm not here just to speak from the podium, right? And to give information. I really built this presentation to have a little bit of fun talking about what's going on, but as well as opening the floor for dialogue. I would really be here and put myself out there to answer any questions or concerns that you may have. And so when we talk about the security risks being real, I hope everyone understands and follows the guidelines of everything that you're buying that is a device that we're putting on our networks and controlling, we're pushing data through. It's a security decision. No matter what it may be in our personal lives or in our business lives, from smartphones to watches to connected devices, and we're going to talk a little bit on that, to printers and servers and PCs and everything that we're touching data with, there's security risks involved everywhere. And so we need to understand what those risks may be, some of the options we have to mitigate some of those just by purchasing different products, and then what we need to do beyond the product to actually manage those and also mitigate more risks past what comes out of the box. And so we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. All right, so this is something I like to share just so people can understand how data flows to a printer, because I realize a lot of organizations, we spend good money, time, and effort protecting data as it goes across our network on other endpoints, from our cloud computing to our PCs to our servers, and how we're moving information. But a lot of organizations haven't taken the time to understand how print data travels across a network and what that can actually do to us and what risks we have involved. So when I show this, we don't condone hacking. It's not a lesson. I just did some screenshotting actually a while ago to show some of the tools that are out there. And this is a discussion I've been having for years as to how print jobs happen across the network and how data can be stolen, manipulated, and used. Because out of the box, printing is over port 9100, which is TCP/IP, which basically, if you back in the day, you got a CD or you went online and downloaded your driver. Same today, right? You plug in a printer, you connect to it, you have the IP address, or you do that discovery, and you start sending print jobs. Out of the box, it's not encrypted. And so if you use a network tool, like this is Wireshark, just going out there and saying, I want to look over port 9100 for any, these are print jobs, because I know that port, I can capture the IP address of the person sending it or the source and the destination, which is the printer. And keep that in mind because I'm going to show you some levels of how this information can be used. But here, this is just one way to capture packets or information as it travels the network. When you actually capture that, you can open this up and actually look in and see the information. It's raw data. And I know Laura's doing a giveaway prize. If you could read this out of the box, I'll double the price, right? And so it's raw data. We don't speak matrix out of our brains. And so we have to do something with it. And so you have to transform that into something you can work with. And for an example, it would be like a PRN file that I could then open up in a text editor. And then within that, I can actually read some more of that information. So as you print, a lot of this information is embedded into the print job language. It tells me who you are, what computer you have, what operating system you're running from, the version of that operating system. And that's why I say this is screenshot, as you see at the bottom corner, 2017 is when I did this. So my operating system is a lot older. But this is good exfiltration of just reconnaissance data that I can take out of a print job to realize, okay, D Rose or Rose DA, so I'm assuming that's David Rose, coming from an IP address is operating off this operating system. Maybe I can find a flaw in that. Now I know what to poke after. In that, as well as if we're using like pin codes to do printing to store on the hard drive, that would be under the job counting information. And there's things that you can use with that we understand, hey, if you're using 1234 as your pin code, typically a human trait is to reuse pin codes. So now that gives me a higher chance of being able to take that information and use it to expose something else. Well past that, there's a lot of conversation that can be had just in that data for reconnaissance. We actually get into the image, and this is where there was a lot of fear into what can be put into a print job. This represents PCL, but what you can actually do is you can print with PostScript as well. And that's where we see a lot more risks and where we've seen people able to put command and lines within PostScript to be able to try and put malware or attacks onto the devices. And this, by the way, does not get picked up through firewalls. There's videos and examples of what people have done, like Fontana and things out there, to bypass data prevention systems, intrusion detection systems, firewalls, because this is not something that's being opened and analyzed and scanned, because it's a normal operation and nothing is really built for that. And so this is where the concerns were with how do you put malware into a network? Well, you can send a print job with corrupted file, and it would load to the printer. And when it hits the printer, it executes the data. And so that was one attack way. But the example I used here was actually just to say, how do I grab that print job and reproduce it? So I could simply just do an electronic print. I could turn that PCL information to a PDF. And then I could look at what was that image. All of this, it took me a few minutes just to screenshot. It's actually done very quickly. You can capture the data, go back home or go onto another device and work through it. But at a high level, try to be as non-technical as possible so that I can be fair to the group here. This is how print jobs can be stolen and manipulated as well as anything that's going back and forth over the network to a printer. This would be a scan, electronic faxes, anything that's not encrypted, it would be susceptible to an attack like this. And you don't actually have to be a genius out there because people develop tools. And so PRET was one of those tools, and PRET is what it's the acronym for Printer Exploitation Toolkit. This was been out there for several years now. What he does is uses the same resources, right? We're using PostScript, PJL, the print job language I showed you, where it has the who you are, what you're sending, and things like that, as well as using PostScript to give you basically a script kiddie or a copy and paste attack against printers. This is something we don't recommend to go out there and play with, but we want you to be aware that you can simply go on to, the internet and just use a search engine to understand how to use these and what these commands are. Things like a mirror attack, being able to copy an image and save those print jobs as they come across. And so this is another fear that's out there, right? This isn't trying to push FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but this is more to make you aware that printers are not just, something on the side, that there's actually people developing attacks and even podcasts over how these things are done, and a lot of people outside of the print businesses of us, like manufacturers, actually host and have conversations. And it seems like every year at Black Hat, somebody was picking on a printer as well. Another piece on there is as we go beyond that and how we're communicating is, okay, what can a device do? What's the dangers of a print device, especially when it's sitting on the internet? And sometimes we would do these things live and show Shodan. Unfortunately, some people would put in like webcam to show another item, and you don't know what you're going to get when things pop up. So we don't do live anymore. This is a screenshot of what Shodan.io is. It's a search engine to go out there and see what's on the internet. If you actually look for like port 9100 or you put in a print product, you could go out there and scan. I know one of our colleagues did a scan in Ireland. I think he found like 60,000 printers using a tool for printers that were sitting on the internet. If you take your time and use the right resources, you can find these devices. The scary parts are things like FTP, which is like the hard drive, and to where we can actually use put commands. When we're not changing passwords or we're leaving these protocols on, this is where it gets dangerous. Is now, can I use that hard drive to actually dump malware from the internet straight to a device if it's not locked up? And we find far too often that people are putting printers just on their network and they're not putting them behind firewalls, or they're not locking down those protocols. And so I just wanted to share that as some of the other examples and things that we've seen is the access directly into the FTP. And so when it comes to, okay, how do we actually manage those risks? What do we do? Well, one thing I wanted to share is you got to start with out of the box. You got to start with the hardware. And so what you're going to look for, and I just wrote some examples of questions and things to think about around the methodology, and then some of our methodology at HP is, one, does the device actually protect itself at a boot? So every time I turn a machine on, how do I know it's trusted? We know our PCs are trusted because of the BIOS protections and the layers that we're putting into them. We know our cell phones are protected because of what's being built at the factory and the chipsets that are there. What about printers? What security is put into those to make sure that the integrity of the device is still there every time I boot it up, that something hasn't tried to put a rootkit or take it control at the lowest levels. Beyond that, we want to make sure that when we're loading code and code gets put onto our machines like firmware, how are we protecting against that? What was there whitelisting? What is your process around that? And those are questions that you should be asking the manufacturers and the people you're working with, like NECS, as to how are these devices protecting against corrupted firmware. The next layer is, okay, in operations, how are we protecting? How do we know that as I'm sending print jobs like David showed us today, how do we know that someone didn't use PostScript attack to try and put malware on my printers? And what layers of protections are there? Because we all want some type of antivirus, right? Or some anti-malware protection. And so we need to understand that. How are we protecting against executables? And lastly, it happens, right? Nothing is perfect. If I'm standing on a podium going, we can't be hacked, tell me to kick rocks and leave. It's life, it's technology. This is what happens. This is why we patch, and this is why we have firmware updates, right? We find a vulnerability. So if a device gets taken over, what layers of protection do you have to notify me, to remove or quarantine that device, and to protect me in the worst case scenario? And let's face it, when you're looking at a print device, a few $100s to a few $1,000s, it's a lot easier to move that off the network, consider it a dead asset, than it is to be concerned about that being the entry point or an egress point into our network to steal other information. And so HP's answer to that is the Sure Start. This is our BIOS protection that we have on our printers. It also came from our labs that we use it in our PCs. And so we make sure we do that integrity check every time we boot a machine. We make sure the code is good. This is from a factory level. This is not a human intervention piece, so it's automatic and it's self-healing. So every time we boot a machine, it's trusted. If it's not, we're going to erase that BIOS, and we're going to pull in that golden copy we have stored from factory to make sure that it's trusted. The next piece is our whitelisting approach to firmware. This, we actually have code signing, and we have our protocols and procedures that every time firmware is being requested and loaded to a machine, we're checking it to make sure it's safe and secure. And if it's not, we're going to throw a code, we're going to lock it down, and we're going to require intervention from humans to replace and remove that firmware and put in good trusted firmware. We're not going to allow it to operate. From a runtime intrusion protection, this is us monitoring the memory of the device. Let's face it, you don't want to have buzzwords, artificial intelligence and all these big expensive pieces put into a printer and keep the cost down. So what we're able to do is we know the baseline of how these machines operate. We know the memory in operations, what a print job does. And so anytime the machine is stepping out of line from the baseline of the operations, we're going to actually go through a reset policy to clear out that memory, to try to remove that action that shouldn't have been there. Therefore, clearing the memory, keeping it from loading to the device, and then we'll go through the other checks of the security to make sure that everything was safe and secure. And beyond that, we have the connection inspector, and that's the insurance on top that we're monitoring the network traffic of the device from the device. That if it is taken over and it's speaking out and it's pinging and trying to go out to websites or command and control centers, we're going to go ahead and quarantine that device based on those actions as well. And so a lot of these items will actually, all of them will come in our enterprise devices and a good majority of our pro devices. And you can definitely sit down and speak with any CS if you want to understand what products have these protections built into them. And so that's out of the box. I just wanted you to know what things you should be looking for, what our answers are to that out of the box security. But it's the same thing. I could buy the most secure door lock on my front part of my house. But at the end of the day, if it's facial recognition and I don't set up my face to be recognized and I'm just using a turnkey or something, what's the point of having that advanced security if I'm not actually going to configure it and manage it, use it? So I want to talk to you about how we actually lock down and control devices. And so if you look at why do we manage security compliance and how it's done today, one is we create our standards, right? We know what we want to have, no matter what the equipment is, what the machines are. We set our standards for configurations. We're going to have password rules. We're going to have encryption rules. We're going to have ports and protocols, what's going to be open and not open, and what's going to be allowed. Are we going to allow end users to download things? Or we have all of these rules we set up to set our policies and our baseline. And then we go through and we're adding devices, we're procuring, and then we're always constantly evaluating those, right? We're making sure, are they set to the standard? And if they're not, we're remediating. We're making sure that they're always set to our standard policies. As well as we're also setting up certificates, as you know. Some people use self-sign, some are using certificate authorities. You know, everyone has their own determinations, but we are working with certificates so that we have trust and we have communication that's encrypted back and forth, and so we are protecting data. And then beyond that, we want visibility, right? We need to understand what the health is our fleet, what's going on, is there devices that are coming in and out of policy so we can investigate why. And so that's kind of like the workflow around securing configuration policies. And so with HP, we plug into that workflow, right? We built Security Manager. Oops, sorry, here we go. We built Security Manager within that same framework and mindset that we're going to create the policies. We're going to add the printers. We're going to evaluate those policies. So if you want your passwords to be 1, 2, 3, 4 for the embedded web server, that's your choice, but let's go ahead and force that out to the fleet through a single piece of software. From there, you're going to evaluate them, you're going to get your assessments, you're going to understand how they scored, and you're going to be able to remediate those and fix those devices, as well as pushing out certificates. And this was actually for the longest, this was one of the major value drivers. It wasn't always just, oh, I want to have my fleet compliance. Is I need encryption, I need certificates. It takes 20 minutes to do one printer. So imagine how many devices you may have and how long that would take. And then there's things beyond that where we actually built in firmware assessments into the software so that we can evaluate the firmware. We can look for devices that are out of compliance that actually have vulnerabilities that need patches, and you can have that results there that you can go ahead and work towards patching those devices. And so one thing I just want to note out that these are really built to run in tandem to complement each other. There is no replacement value here, right? They need to be running together. We need to have proper embedded security, and we need to manage those devices from a configuration standpoint. And so one thing we always put, everyone thinks we bought the world's most secure printers, we're good. Well, we've got to lock them down now, right? A couple things I just want to talk about from work from home, because this is still our future. These are things we're working on, and where we're going is we know IT's had the hardest time because we've stepped out of the sphere of control. We've got devices well beyond our perimeters. We're still getting a lot of questions on how we're going to manage printers, how we're going to get the supplies, the service, but also, hey, you know what? I need to protect what my people are printing, and are we going to put them on a VPN? Or are we going to look for a piece of software? And there's always a lot of questions. And I would suggest that you take that assessment into your environment and say, okay, what is our policy? Are we just trying to have cost savings, or do we actually want to look at how we're exposed and anything that we may need to mitigate? For example, I'm putting a wireless printer at my end user's home, and they're putting it on the same network that their Alexa's on, that their Google's, all their tablets, and maybe they didn't have network segmentation So they created a guest network for all of those IoT devices and then put the corporate environment on a separate part of the network, right? And so those are some of the things we need to investigate, and this is what's made problems. And printers, let's face it, no one's really wanting to put them on VPNs, and so we don't have that network connectivity. So we start looking at how do we print, and we start looking at cloud print, things that we could actually enforce encryption, and we have trust, or we don't have to worry about trust because then we use a zero trust way to actually print through the cloud and enforce encryption. The reason I wanted to bring up the sphere of control, and like I said, IoT devices, is okay, so what's outside of the network control from corporate? Well, this, everything at home, and we need to make sure that we are protecting our corporate assets and our data and our information, because that's our business. Our information is our business, right? We need to protect that from these devices. And so this is why I implore you to take take a copy of this as well, we'll give you, and start looking at some of these points that we're addressing. Is, do we have the right endpoints that give us security? Are we implementing proper cyber hygiene? Are we following best practices? Are we securing data? Do we have the actual network? Are we helping our employees set up their network properly, right? And there's a lot of things that we can set up some workshops and help you with NECS here. They have some great assets and people and experience and knowledge, and this is what we want to offer, and this is what we want to put out there, is saying that we've got to create some level of framework, and how can we help you plug that in and make sure that you're able to execute on those needs. The other piece, keep in mind, people, we're doing the best that we can, but there's always a Dave on the network, right? And so, and I winked to Laura because she put this one up before, and I've stolen it, and I love it. We're going to do everything we can, but we've got to make sure that we are also paying attention to our people and putting processes in play to protect against our oopsies and our people that make those mistakes. One thing I wanted to share is kind of the next steps, things that you can do. Is actually looking at, we can do some assessments here, right? With NECS and their partnership with us, we've actually built questionnaires that we can go through some of the guidelines from NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards of Technology. It's a risk assessment that we built from some of their best practices around copying devices. And so we can run through that with you and look to identify any potential risks. From that, I've put up some points that we have found doing assessments globally. Organizations just don't have plans around printing. They have it around the operation of printing, but not around security. The other part is we can actually help you through NECS to actually go out there and scan the firmware and to actually give you a report as to, do you have machines that are out of compliance that are HP devices, and let you be aware of any of those bulletins and vulnerabilities that are out there today, so you can make that choice, a more informed decision of where to go forward. We'll be able to tell you, are the machines end of life? Are you able to repair and actually patch those with updated firmware? And then lastly, we can actually go through and scan configurations with you as well. And so those are some of the areas I would implore you to look at what's going to make sense and help you through an assessment, because we can't really make informed decisions until we've actually come in and understood what we have to work with. We can use best practices and implement them, but sometimes we already have the proper infrastructures. Maybe we need to put in some new rules, or we have legacy infrastructures and we actually need to invest both time and effort and money into what needs to be the future. And sometimes that investment has a good ROI into it as well. And so this is why I say it's always best to start with discovery and informing ourselves as to what's happening out there. Like I warned you in the beginning, I know it's a lot of information to take on. I'm glad that they're recording this to make this available to you. And at HP, we do make ourselves available to actually bring this to you individually and have a deeper, longer conversation through this. I just looked at a short period, 30 minutes. What can I give you? What can I inform you with? And what would make most sense? So I hope that this was something to help you start thinking and start looking in the direction to reach out and ask questions. But here I do want to open the floor for any questions here. Be aware, I have thick skin. If you got one of those questions where you want to stump the chump, we'll say, right, throw something tough, I'm okay with it. But yeah, definitely I'm here. We're here to support with NECS, and I know Laura's got something to share here at the end as well. So I'll be hanging back while she's talking. If you've got any questions, please feel free to just throw them out there. I'm just going to stop sharing real quick.
All right, it looks like we have a question here. Came in through the chat. What would a site assessment cost?
So that is actually would put that over to NECS, and so they have access to our tools and everything, and you would need to talk with them because it's, you know, to be fair, it's man hours and their resources, and so I can't speak for them.
Okay. Any other questions, anyone?
I will say this: I can get on a Zoom call for free anytime you want to talk.
Same.
That's why I would say is the best way to start, right? Is just have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is Don Clark, Director of Sales at NECS. I'm not sure who delivered that question, but we'd be happy to have a follow-up with you guys, to whoever that was that asked the question, to set up a meeting to have a conversation. And once we dive into it, we can give you some more background on what it would cost, depending on what your situation looks like.
Yeah, because you've got to kind of look at the scope and determine, you know, what's going to be looked at and what tools and resources are out there and things like that. But yeah, like I say, the first thing is just engage in a conversation, a short, 15, 30-minute conversation as to where you are, what you'd like to achieve, and then that's where you start building out. Is this something that we're going to do that's a zero cost, or something that's going to require more man hours and things?
All right, looks like Joe gave us his contact information in the chat. He's a John Sullivan customer. If somebody wants to grab that from the chat, you know what, I will too, just so take a screenshot of that. Make sure we get back to you, Joe. All right. Any other questions, anyone, before I talk about the giveaway? Because we've got great resource in David here that can answer the tough questions. All right. Well, we appreciate your time and attention this morning. So let me share the slide that I have. And some of you may have seen me drinking from my own, I have to put it in front of my face, my own Yeti mug here. The camera's not loving that, but anyway, you will get one of these great Yeti Rambler stackable pint mugs as a way of saying thank you. So we've put up here Dan McBride's information. If you would be so kind as to email your name, your company email address, and shipping phone number to Dan, he will send you one of these great mugs. And these are awesome. They actually have like a magnetic top here to actually move the lid so that you can keep your beverage hot or cold as we're going into different seasons here. So it's a pretty cool giveaway. So hopefully everybody's captured this. And again, we thank you for your attention this morning. And if you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to funnel those back through your rep at NECS or anyone here, and we'll be sure to answer for you. And David and I, in support of NECS, like we said, more than happy to jump on a Zoom call, more than happy to provide you any additional information.
Exactly. And when travel changes for the world, I'd love to come out and see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all would.
So, well, thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. If there's no further questions, we will close it out this morning. And just for everyone on the call, this is a first of a three-part series, so there'll be 2 more webinars next week. We're going to talk about our WorkPath app platform, BizCom faxing with WorkPath apps, and we'll also be doing a session on HP PCs next Thursday. So stay tuned for those. Hope you can join. And again, thanks again for participating today. We very much appreciate it. All right. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.